The champagne glass slipped from Rebecca's hand, shattering against the marble floor of the upscale Seattle restaurant as her brother Marcus stood at the head of the table, raising a toast to his promotion. What should have been her 30th birthday celebration had become his victory party, and not a single person at that table seemed to remember what day it actually was. But when Rebecca stood up and announced the secret she had been hiding for 3 years, the entire family gathering imploded in ways none of them could have predicted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca Chen had always lived in the shadow of her golden child brother, but she had never imagined her family could forget her 30th birthday entirely. The realization hit her like a physical blow as she sat in the private dining room at Cascadia, watching her parents beam with pride while Marcus announced his promotion to senior partner at his law firm. The reservation had been made under her name. The date was March 15th, her birthday. Yet somehow, this had transformed into Marcus's celebration, and she was nothing more than a forgotten guest at her own party. The morning had started with such hope. Rebecca had woken up in her downtown Seattle apartment, expecting the usual flood of birthday messages and calls. Instead, her phone remained stubbornly silent except for automated greetings from her bank and dental office. She had checked her social media accounts, wondering if perhaps people were planning surprise posts later in the day. Nothing. Even her closest friends seemed to have forgotten, though she realized with a sinking heart that she had been so absorbed in her secret project for the past few months that she had barely maintained those relationships. By noon, when her mother Carol finally called, Rebecca felt a surge of relief. At least someone remembered. But Carol's voice carried an unusual excitement that had nothing to do with birthday wishes. "Rebecca, darling, I know this is last minute, but can you join us for dinner tonight? Marcus has incredible news to share, and we want the whole family there to celebrate." "Tonight?" Rebecca had asked, confused. "But Mom, it's my—" I know, it's a Tuesday, and you probably have plans, but this is really important. Marcus specifically asked for you to be there. You know how much your support means to him." Rebecca had paused, waiting for her mother to remember, to acknowledge the significance of the date. Instead, Carol had continued chattering about restaurant reservations and how proud she was of Marcus's achievements. "What time?" Rebecca had asked quietly, her heart sinking. "7 o'clock at Cascadia. You know, that lovely place in South Lake Union where we celebrated your father's retirement last year. Marcus chose especially." The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca. She had discovered Cascadia during one of her business meetings and had mentioned to her family how impressed she was with the ambiance and cuisine. Now, Marcus was using her recommendation for his celebration on her birthday. Rebecca arrived at the restaurant that evening wearing the navy blue dress she had bought specifically for her 30th birthday dinner. She had imagined this milestone celebration for months, picturing herself surrounded by family and friends, finally ready to share the news that would change everything. Instead, she found herself seated at a table decorated with congratulatory flowers and balloons that had nothing to do with her. Her father, Robert, a distinguished man in his early 60s who ran a successful architectural firm, was already deep in conversation with Marcus about partnership structures and client portfolios. Her mother, elegant as always in her carefully chosen outfit, was taking photos of Marcus with the kind of maternal pride that Rebecca had rarely seen directed toward her own achievements. "Rebecca, sweetheart, you look lovely," Carol said absently as Rebecca took her seat. "Doesn't Marcus look handsome in his new suit? He bought it specially for his promotion announcement." Marcus, 2 years younger than Rebecca, but somehow always the family's shining star, looked every inch the successful attorney. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his confidence radiating in a way that had always come naturally to him. He had inherited their father's commanding presence and their mother's social grace, a combination that had opened doors throughout his life. "Hey, Becca," he said, using the childhood nickname that now felt condescending rather than affectionate. "Thanks for coming on short notice. I know you're busy with whatever you're working on these days." The dismissive tone in his voice stung. Whatever she was working on. If only he knew that her current project represented the culmination of 3 years of secret planning, risk-taking, and determination. But tonight wasn't about her accomplishments. It never was. "Of course," Rebecca replied, forcing a smile. Congratulations on the promotion. Senior partner at 32 is impressive. 28, Marcus corrected with a grin. I'm the youngest senior partner in the firm's history. The mistake had been deliberate, Rebecca realized. He wanted to emphasize not just his success, but his youth, the way he had surpassed traditional timelines and expectations. Meanwhile, she was turning 30 with what her family saw as little to show for it. As the evening progressed, Rebecca found herself increasingly invisible at her own birthday dinner. The conversation revolved entirely around Marcus's achievement, his future plans, the cases he would be handling, the clients who were specifically requesting him. Their parents hung on his every word, asking detailed questions about his work and offering advice based on their own professional experiences. You know, son, Robert said, swirling his wine thoughtfully, when I was building my firm, the key was establishing trust with high-profile clients early. It sounds like you're already doing that. Absolutely, Carol agreed. And the partnership track at Whitman Sterling and Associates is so competitive. You should be incredibly proud of yourself. Rebecca sipped her wine and tried to calculate how long she had been sitting there without anyone directing a single question or comment toward her. 20 minutes? 30? She had become a silent observer of her brother's triumph, a warm body filling a chair at what was supposed to be her milestone celebration. The waitress approached to take their orders, and Rebecca noticed how efficiently Marcus took charge of the interaction, recommending dishes and wine pairings with the kind of authority that came from frequent fine dining experiences. His law firm clearly had a generous entertainment budget. I'll have the salmon, Rebecca said when it was her turn. Good choice, the waitress replied. It's one of our signature dishes. Are you celebrating something special tonight? Before Rebecca could answer, Marcus jumped in. Partnership at my law firm. It's been a long journey, but worth every hour of work. Congratulations, the waitress beamed. We'll make sure to bring out something special for dessert. Rebecca felt a laugh bubble up in her throat, but it came out as more of a choke. The waitress glanced at her with mild concern, but Marcus was already launching into another story about his path to partnership, and the moment passed. As their meals arrived, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it hopefully, thinking perhaps someone had finally remembered her birthday.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Instead, it was from her assistant at the small consulting firm where she worked. Hope you're having a wonderful birthday. Looking forward to hearing about your big announcement tomorrow. The message was a stark reminder of the secret Rebecca had been keeping from her family. Tomorrow, she was scheduled to reveal something that would fundamentally change their perception of her. But sitting here, invisible and forgotten, she wondered if it would even matter. Earth to Rebecca, Marcus said, snapping his fingers playfully. You're being awfully quiet tonight. Cat got your tongue? The childish expression, delivered with his trademark charming smile, felt like a slap. Here she was, a successful 30-year-old woman, being treated like a sullen teenager who couldn't properly appreciate her brother's moment of glory. Just listening, she replied evenly. It's fascinating to hear about the legal world. Well, don't worry, Marcus said with mock encouragement. I'm sure consulting has its moments too. Maybe someday you'll have something big to celebrate. The patronizing tone was the final straw, but Rebecca maintained her composure. She had learned long ago that reacting to Marcus's casual dismissals only led to being labeled as jealous or oversensitive. Instead, she took another sip of wine and continued to observe the family dynamics that had shaped her entire life. Carol was telling a story about Marcus's childhood, how he had always been destined for greatness, how his teachers had consistently praised his leadership qualities and academic excellence. It was a familiar narrative, one that Rebecca had heard countless variations of over the years. Marcus the star student, Marcus the natural leader, Marcus the one who exceeded every expectation. Remember when he won that debate tournament in high school? Carol continued. The judges said they had never seen such poise and articulation in someone so young. He was born for law, Robert added proudly. Some people have to work to develop those skills, but Marcus has always had them naturally. Rebecca remembered that debate tournament. She had been there, a senior when Marcus was a sophomore, and she had watched him perform with the same mixture of pride and envy that characterized most of their interactions. He had been genuinely impressive, but what stuck with her was the aftermath. how her own academic achievements that year had been overshadowed by his single tournament victory. She had graduated as valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Northwestern, and been accepted into their accelerated business program. But somehow, Marcus's debate trophy had taken up more space on their parents' mantle than her graduation photos. The pattern had continued through college. While Rebecca was earning her MBA and working multiple internships to build her resume, Marcus was coasting through his undergraduate years on charm and natural ability. Yet somehow, his casual successes were celebrated more enthusiastically than her dedicated achievements. After graduation, Rebecca had taken a position at a mid-sized consulting firm, working her way up through careful planning and consistent performance. She had specialized in organizational restructuring, helping companies streamline their operations and improve profitability. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, respectable, and well compensated. Marcus, meanwhile, had sailed through law school and landed a position at one of Seattle's most prestigious firms through a combination of academic credentials and networking skills. His career trajectory had been swift and smooth, each promotion coming exactly when expected. But what her family didn't know, what she had been carefully concealing for the past 3 years, was that Rebecca had been building something entirely her own. While they saw her as the dependable daughter with the safe job and predictable life, she had been secretly developing a revolutionary software platform that was about to change everything. The idea had come to her during a particularly challenging consulting project, when she realized that most companies were using outdated systems to manage their organizational changes. She had started developing a solution in her spare time, working nights and weekends to create something that could automate and optimize the entire process. What began as a personal project had evolved into something much larger. Rebecca had quietly filed patents, built a prototype, and conducted extensive testing with several client companies. The results had been remarkable: productivity increases of up to 40%, cost reductions that translated to millions in savings. She had been approached by 3 major tech companies interested in acquiring her technology, and tomorrow she was scheduled to announce her decision. The acquisition offer she had accepted would make her a multi-millionaire overnight. More importantly, it would establish her as an innovator in her field, someone who had identified a gap in the market and created a solution that would benefit organizations worldwide. But sitting at this birthday dinner that had become Marcus's celebration, Rebecca wondered if her family would even care about her achievement. They had become so accustomed to seeing her as the responsible, predictable daughter that they might not be able to process this transformation. "You know what I've always admired about you, son?" Robert was saying to Marcus. "You've never been afraid to take risks, to put yourself out there. That's what separates the truly successful from the mediocre." The comment stung because it revealed so clearly how her father saw her. Mediocre. Someone who played it safe, who chose security over ambition. If only he knew that she had risked everything over the past 3 years, working without a safety net, investing her savings into a project that could have failed spectacularly. "Thanks, Dad," Marcus replied. "I've always believed that if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. Complacency is the enemy of success." Another indirect shot at Rebecca, delivered with Marcus's characteristic blend of wisdom and condescension. She bit back the urge to point out that her supposed complacency had actually been careful preparation for something much bigger than a law firm partnership. As the evening progressed, Rebecca found herself studying her family with new clarity. Her parents' patriotism toward Marcus wasn't just about his achievements, it was about their perception of who he was versus who she was. Marcus represented excitement, ambition, the kind of success story they could brag about to their friends. Rebecca represented stability, responsibility, the kind of dependable success that didn't generate interesting dinner party conversations. The irony was that Marcus's partnership, while impressive, was ultimately predictable. He had followed a well-established path, met expected milestones, achieved success within existing structures. Rebecca, on the other hand, had created something entirely new, identified opportunities that others had missed, built value from nothing. But her family couldn't see this because they had never really looked at her. They saw the surface, the consulting job and the steady paycheck and the lack of dramatic career moves.
They didn't see the patents in her name, the late nights spent coding and testing, the meetings with venture capitalists and tech executives. Tomorrow, when she announced that tech giant Solutions was acquiring her platform for $58 million, everything would change. The family dynamics that had shaped her entire life would be forced to adjust to a new reality. But tonight, on her forgotten 30th birthday, she was still invisible. The dessert course arrived with a flourish, an elaborate chocolate creation with sparklers and a congratulatory message written in elegant script across the plate. "Congratulations, Marcus," it read, and the waitress placed it in front of him with a smile. "This looks incredible," Carol exclaimed, taking out her phone to photograph the dessert. "Marcus, you have to get a picture with this. It's such a perfect ending to a perfect evening." Rebecca watched as her brother posed with the dessert, his smile confident and comfortable. This was his natural element, being celebrated, being the center of attention, being the one everyone wanted to photograph and congratulate. "We should make a toast," Robert announced, raising his wine glass, "to Marcus, who has once again exceeded our expectations and made us incredibly proud. May this be the first of many such celebrations." The glasses clinked together, and Rebecca dutifully participated in the toast to her brother's success at her own birthday dinner.
The symbolism was almost too perfect, too cruelly ironic to be real. As they prepared to leave, Carol was already making plans for more celebrations. A party at the house next weekend, dinner with the extended family, perhaps a weekend getaway to celebrate properly. All of it centered around Marcus. All of it focused on his achievement. "This has been wonderful," Marcus said, embracing their parents. "Thanks for making tonight so special. I know I'll remember this dinner for the rest of my life." Rebecca stood to the side, invisible as always, as her family exchanged hugs and congratulations. No one seemed to notice that she had barely spoken during the meal, that she had spent most of the evening listening rather than participating. "Ready to head out, Becca?" Marcus asked, and she realized he was offering her a ride home. "I'll take the bus," she replied. "I want to walk a bit, clear my head." "Suit yourself," he said with a shrug. "See you soon." As her family left the restaurant together, chattering excitedly about Marcus's future and the celebrations to come, Rebecca remained behind to pay her portion of the bill. She had insisted on covering her own meal, a small gesture of independence in an evening where she had felt completely powerless. The waitress processed her payment with the same cheerful efficiency she had shown all evening, unaware that she had just witnessed a birthday celebration where the birthday girl had been completely forgotten. "Thank you for dining with us tonight," she said. "I hope you enjoyed celebrating your friend's promotion." "It was memorable," Rebecca replied, which was certainly true, though not for the reasons the waitress might have expected. As Rebecca walked through the quiet streets of South Lake Union, her heels clicking against the pavement, she reflected on the evening's events. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would announce her acquisition deal and force her family to see her in an entirely different light. But tonight, on her 30th birthday, she had experienced the ultimate expression of how little space she occupied in their world. The irony wasn't lost on her that Marcus's celebration had taken place at a restaurant she had recommended, on a date that should have been significant for her, with money she had contributed to pay for her own meal. It was as if she were a ghost at her own birthday party, present but not really there, participating but not truly included. But ghosts, Rebecca reflected as she walked through the empty streets, sometimes had a way of surprising people. Tomorrow, she would step out of the shadows and into the light, and her family would be forced to reckon with the reality of who she had become while they weren't paying attention. The acquisition announcement would change everything: the financial security, the professional recognition, the shift in family dynamics. All of it would begin tomorrow, with a single phone call that would transform her from the forgotten daughter into someone impossible to ignore. As Rebecca reached her apartment building, she looked up at the city lights twinkling above her. 30 years old, she thought, and finally ready to stop being invisible. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one where she would no longer accept being overshadowed by her brother's achievements or dismissed by her parents' expectations. The secret she had been keeping for 3 years was about to change everything.
and Marcus's promotion celebration would pale in comparison to what was coming next. But first, she had to get through the rest of her forgotten birthday, alone in her apartment with only the knowledge of what tomorrow would bring to comfort her. The last few hours of her 20s passed quietly, with Rebecca sitting by her window, looking out at the Seattle skyline and thinking about the conversation she would have in the morning. The conversation that would finally force her family to see her not as the responsible, predictable daughter, but as the innovative entrepreneur she had become while they weren't paying attention. At midnight, as March 15th became March 16th, Rebecca whispered "Happy birthday" to herself and smiled. Tomorrow, everything would change. Rebecca's alarm clock buzzed at 6:30 the next morning, but she had been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and rehearsing the conversation that would change everything. Her phone sat on the nightstand, silent and accusatory. Not a single family member had called or texted to wish her a belated happy birthday. The oversight wasn't just forgetfulness anymore. It was a complete erasure of her existence in their minds. She showered and dressed carefully in her best business suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that projected confidence and authority. Today required armor, and professional attire would have to suffice. As she applied her makeup, Rebecca caught her own eyes in the mirror and saw something different there. Yesterday's hurt had crystallized into determination overnight. The first call came at exactly 9 o'clock from Jennifer Walsh, the Senior Vice President of Acquisitions at Tech Giant Solutions. Rebecca had been working with Jennifer for 6 months, navigating due diligence, patent reviews, and endless legal documentation. The acquisition had been her secret obsession, her escape from the suffocating predictability of her consulting job and the casual dismissal of her family. "Rebecca, are you ready for this?" Jennifer's voice crackled through the phone with barely contained excitement. The board signed off on the final terms last night. $58 million, plus equity options that could double that in 3 years. You've created something extraordinary. The words washed over Rebecca like validation incarnate. $58 million. The number still felt surreal, even after months of negotiations. Her software platform, developed in secret during countless nights and weekends, would be integrated into Tech Giant's existing infrastructure and deployed to Fortune 500 companies worldwide. "I'm ready," Rebecca replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "What's the timeline for the public announcement?" "We'll issue the press release at 2 o'clock Pacific time. That gives you about 4 hours to notify anyone who needs to hear it directly from you first. Family, close friends, your current employer. The tech press will pick this up immediately, so you want to control the narrative while you can." After ending the call with Jennifer, Rebecca sat in her kitchen, coffee cooling in her hands, and contemplated the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Her family had no idea that the quiet daughter they had forgotten at dinner last night was about to become one of the most talked about entrepreneurs in Seattle's tech scene. She scrolled through her contacts, pausing at her parents' numbers, then Marcus's. The temptation to call them immediately was overwhelming, to deliver the news with all the dramatic impact it deserved. But something held her back. Perhaps it was the memory of sitting invisible at her own birthday dinner, watching them celebrate Marcus's predictable promotion while her revolutionary achievement remained hidden. Instead, Rebecca called her best friend from college, Sarah Martinez, who now lived in Portland and worked as a journalist for a major tech publication. Sarah had been one of the few people who knew about Rebecca's secret project, offering encouragement during the difficult phases of development. "Holy shit, Becca," Sarah breathed when Rebecca delivered the news. 58 million? Are you fucking kidding me right now? "Language, Sarah," Rebecca laughed, feeling genuinely happy for the first time since her disaster birthday dinner. "But no, I'm not kidding. It's real. It's happening today." "This is insane. You've been working on this for 3 years in complete secrecy, and now you're about to become stupidly rich and famous? How are you feeling? Are you freaking out? I would be freaking out." Rebecca considered the question seriously. "I think I'm in shock."
Yesterday was my 30th birthday, and my family completely forgot about it. They turned it into a celebration for Marcus's law firm promotion instead. And now, today, I'm about to announce something that completely eclipses anything he's ever accomplished. Wait, they forgot your birthday? What the hell is wrong with your family? The genuine outrage in Sarah's voice was comforting. Rebecca had sometimes wondered if she was being overly sensitive about her family dynamics, if perhaps she was imagining the favoritism and dismissal. But Sarah's reaction confirmed that the situation was as problematic as she had always believed. "It gets worse," Rebecca continued. "Marcus made all these comments about how I never take risks, how I'm stuck in mediocrity while he's achieving greatness. Meanwhile, I've been building something that's about to change my entire industry." "The irony is delicious," Sarah said. "When are you telling them?" "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to wait until after the press release goes live. Let them find out the same way everyone else does." "That's cold, Becca. I love it." After hanging up with Sarah, Rebecca decided to inform her current employer before the news broke publicly. David Kim, the managing partner at her consulting firm, had always been supportive of her work, though he had no idea about her secret project. The conversation would be awkward, essentially announcing her resignation while revealing that she had been developing competing technology on the side. David's reaction was a mixture of shock, admiration, and barely concealed hurt that she hadn't trusted him with the information sooner. "Rebecca, this is incredible news, but I have to ask why you kept this from us. We could have helped, provided resources, maybe even structured this as a joint venture." "I needed to do this on my own," Rebecca replied honestly. "I needed to prove to myself that I could create something significant without depending on anyone else's resources or connections." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with David eventually offering his congratulations and asking if she would consider consulting for the firm on a project basis after the acquisition was complete. It was a generous offer, and Rebecca promised to consider it once the initial transition was finished. By noon, Rebecca had handled all the necessary professional communications. Her lawyer had confirmed that all legal documents were properly executed, her accountant was prepared for the tax implications, and her bank had been notified about the incoming wire transfer that would fundamentally alter her financial status. The only people left to notify were her family. Rebecca stared at her phone, thumb hovering over her mother's contact information. The mature, responsible approach would be to call them individually, explain the situation calmly, and give them time to process the news before it became public. But every time she thought about making those calls, she remembered sitting invisible at her own birthday dinner, watching them toast Marcus's achievement while completely ignoring her existence. An alternative plan began to form in her mind. Marcus had mentioned during dinner that he was taking the rest of the week off to celebrate his promotion. Their parents had suggested a family lunch that weekend to continue the festivities. What if Rebecca simply showed up to that lunch and announced her news then? What if she let them discover that while they were celebrating Marcus's promotion, she had been quietly building something that would overshadow his achievement entirely? The more she thought about it, the more appealing the idea became. There was a poetic justice to revealing her secret during another of Marcus's celebrations, just as he unknowingly stole her birthday dinner. The family dynamics that had shaped her entire life would be forced to adjust in real time, with witnesses present to observe the transformation. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Darling, we're so excited about this weekend's lunch celebration for Marcus. Can you make it Saturday at 1 o'clock? The usual place downtown." The usual place was Metropolitan Grill, an upscale steakhouse where the family gathered for significant occasions. It was expensive, traditional, and exactly the kind of venue where her parents felt comfortable displaying their success. Rebecca had been there for Marcus's law school graduation, her father's major business deals, and countless other celebrations that had nothing to do with her achievements. She typed back a simple response: "I'll be there. Looking forward to it." What her mother didn't know was that by Saturday, Rebecca's acquisition would be front-page news in the business section of every major newspaper. By Saturday, her face would be featured in tech publications and business magazines. By Saturday, the family dynamic would be irrevocably altered. At exactly 2 o'clock, Rebecca watched from her apartment as the press release went live. Her phone immediately began buzzing with calls and notifications as the news spread through tech industry networks. The headline was everything she had hoped for. Local entrepreneur sells revolutionary organizational software to tech giant for $58 million. Within minutes, her LinkedIn profile was flooded with connection requests and congratulatory messages.
Former colleagues, business school classmates, and industry contacts she hadn't heard from in years were suddenly eager to reconnect. The validation was intoxicating after years of feeling overlooked and underestimated. An hour later, her phone rang with a call from a reporter at the Seattle Times who wanted to schedule an interview about her journey from consultant to successful entrepreneur. Then came calls from venture capitalists interested in her next project, headhunters with offers from major tech companies, and business partners proposing collaboration opportunities. As the afternoon progressed, Rebecca realized that her life had fundamentally changed in ways that went far beyond the financial windfall. She was no longer the invisible daughter, the predictable consultant, the responsible sibling living in Marcus's shadow. She was now Rebecca Chen, successful entrepreneur, innovative technologist, someone worthy of attention and respect. But her family remained conspicuously silent. By evening, the story had spread to national business publications. Rebecca's acquisition was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal's website, with a detailed analysis of how her software could revolutionize organizational management across multiple industries. Her photo accompanied the article, a professional headshot that made her look confident and accomplished. Still no word from her parents or Marcus. Rebecca began to wonder if they had seen the news at all. Her parents weren't particularly tech-savvy, and Marcus was probably too busy celebrating his promotion to pay attention to industry news outside the legal field. It was possible that they remained completely unaware that their forgotten daughter had just become one of Seattle's most successful entrepreneurs. The thought both amused and frustrated her. Even her moment of ultimate triumph was being overshadowed by their indifference and inattention. She could become the most successful person in the family, and they still wouldn't notice unless someone explicitly brought it to their attention. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of interviews, meetings, and administrative tasks related to the acquisition. Rebecca took time off from her consulting job to handle the transition, though she realized with a mixture of relief and anxiety that she would never need to return to that predictable routine. The financial transfer was completed on Friday afternoon, and Rebecca's bank account suddenly contained more money than she had ever imagined possessing. The number on her screen looked like a mistake, too many digits to represent her actual wealth. But it was real, the result of 3 years of secret work, countless hours of development and testing, and the vision to create something that major corporations desperately needed. Still no contact from her family. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather for March in Seattle. Rebecca chose her outfit carefully, a designer blouse she had purchased the day before, tailored pants that project success without being ostentatious, and jewelry that suggested wealth without screaming nouveau riche. She wanted to look like someone who had always been successful, not someone who had just acquired a fortune overnight. The drive to Metropolitan Grill gave her time to rehearse her announcement one final time. She had considered various approaches, from subtle hints to dramatic revelations, finally settling on a direct approach that would leave no room for misinterpretation or deflection. The restaurant was exactly as she remembered it: dark wood paneling, white tablecloths, and an atmosphere of quiet affluence that made every conversation feel important.
The hostess led her to their usual table, where her parents and Marcus were already seated, champagne glasses raised in yet another toast to his promotion. "Rebecca, sweetheart," her mother called out, waving her over with the kind of forced enthusiasm reserved for family obligations. "We were just talking about Marcus's first week as senior partner. The stories he has are fascinating." Rebecca took her seat and noticed immediately that no champagne had been poured for her. The celebration was clearly intended as a continuation of Marcus's triumph, with her role once again relegated to supportive audience member. "How's work been for you?" her father asked, absently, the kind of polite inquiry that expected a brief, unremarkable response. "Actually, work has been quite interesting lately," Rebecca replied, accepting the champagne glass that Marcus belatedly poured for her. "I have some news to share." "Oh, wonderful," her mother said, though her attention was clearly still focused on Marcus. "Are you getting a promotion at the consulting firm?" The assumption that her news would be something small and predictable was exactly what Rebecca had expected, but it still stung. Even now, when she was about to reveal the most significant achievement of her life, they assumed it would pale in comparison to Marcus's accomplishments. Not exactly, Rebecca replied, accepting the champagne glass that Marcus belatedly poured for her. I have some news to share. Oh, wonderful, her mother said, though her attention was clearly still focused on Marcus. Are you getting a promotion at the consulting firm? The assumption that her news would be something small and predictable was exactly what Rebecca had expected, but it still stung. Even now, when she was about to reveal the most significant achievement of her life, they assumed it would pale in comparison to Marcus's accomplishments. Not exactly, Rebecca said, savoring the moment before everything changed. Actually, I've been working on something outside of the consulting firm for the past 3 years, a software platform that I developed independently. Marcus looked mildly interested, probably assuming she was talking about some minor side project or freelance work. That's great, Becca. It's good to have hobbies outside of your main job. It wasn't a hobby, Rebecca continued, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. It was a business venture. On Wednesday, I sold that software platform to tech giant Solutions. The table fell silent. Her parents looked confused, as though she had just announced something in a foreign language. Marcus's expression shifted from polite interest to actual attention, perhaps recognizing that tech giant was a significant player in the tech industry. You sold software? Her father asked slowly. I didn't know you knew anything about software development. I taught myself over the past few years, Rebecca replied. The platform I created helps companies optimize their organizational restructuring processes. It turns out there was significant demand for that kind of solution. Well, that's lovely, dear, her mother said, with the kind of patronizing encouragement typically reserved for children's art projects. I'm sure it will provide some nice supplemental income. Rebecca took a sip of her champagne, letting the moment stretch as her family continued to fundamentally misunderstand what she was telling them. The acquisition price was $58 million, she said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Her mother's smile froze in place. Her father's eyes widened as though he had just witnessed something impossible. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Marcus asked, setting down his glass with trembling hands. $58 million, Rebecca repeated, each word landing like a physical blow. Plus equity options that could potentially double that amount over the next 3 years. Her mother made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a whisper. Her father leaned forward, staring at Rebecca as though seeing her for the first time in 30 years. You're joking, Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. This is some kind of elaborate prank, right? Because that's an insane amount of money. Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, opening the Wall Street Journal article that featured her photo and the details of the acquisition. She placed the phone in the center of the table where all of them could see the screen. Revolutionary software platform net Seattle entrepreneur $58 million in tech giant acquisition, Marcus read aloud, his voice growing weaker with each word. Rebecca Chen, 30, developed the organizational optimization software over 3 years while working as a consultant. The photo accompanying the article showed Rebecca looking confident and professional, every inch the successful entrepreneur. It was a stark contrast to the invisible daughter they had ignored for decades. This is impossible, her mother whispered. You work at that little consulting firm downtown. You've never mentioned anything about software or technology or entrepreneurship. I've been working on this project for 3 years, Rebecca replied calmly. Every night, every weekend, every spare moment I had. I filed patents, built prototypes, conducted testing with multiple companies. I've been building this business while you thought I was just going to work and coming home to watch television. Her father was scrolling through the article on her phone, his expression shifting between shock and something that might have been pride. Rebecca, this is extraordinary. Why didn't you tell us what you were working on? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Rebecca looked at each of them in turn, seeing the confusion and hurt in their faces, the dawning realization that they had fundamentally misjudged their own daughter. When would I have told you? She asked gently.
During the family dinners where you spent the entire time talking about Marcus's cases? During the holidays when every conversation centered around his achievements? Or maybe during my 30th birthday dinner when you turned it into a celebration of his promotion and forgot that it was supposed to be about me? The words landed with devastating precision. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, and for the first time, Rebecca saw genuine shame in her eyes. "Oh my God," Carol whispered. "Wednesday was your birthday, your 30th birthday, and we completely forgot." "You didn't just forget," Rebecca continued, her voice remaining steady despite the emotion building in her chest. "You invited me to what I thought was my birthday celebration, then spent the entire evening celebrating Marcus instead. You literally used my birthday dinner as an opportunity to toast his success, while I sat there invisible." Marcus had gone completely pale. "Becca, I had no idea. I thought Mom and Dad had just decided to combine celebrations to be efficient." "You thought it was efficient to hijack your sister's milestone birthday for your promotion party?" Rebecca asked, though her tone remained more sad than angry. "Did it occur to any of you to wonder why I was so quiet that night? Why I barely participated in the conversation?" Her parents were staring at each other across the table, some unspoken communication passing between them. The weight of their oversight was finally becoming clear, and the timing made it infinitely worse.
While you were celebrating Marcus's predictable career advancement, Rebecca continued, I was sitting on the biggest business deal of my life. While you were toasting his promotion to senior partner, I was about to become one of the youngest self-made millionaires in Seattle's tech industry. The restaurant around them had grown quiet, other diners sensing the intensity of the conversation at their table. Rebecca realized that she had been speaking more loudly than intended, her composure finally beginning to crack under the weight of 30 years of accumulated frustration. I don't understand, her mother said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. How did we not know? How did we miss something this significant? Because you stopped seeing me years ago, Rebecca replied, her voice breaking slightly. You've been so focused on Marcus's achievements, so convinced that he was the successful one in the family, that you never bothered to look at what I was actually doing with my life. Marcus was staring at the phone screen, scrolling through additional articles about the acquisition. Becca, there are dozens of stories about this. You're being called one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in the Pacific Northwest. Forbes wants to interview you. The mayor's office issued a statement congratulating you on behalf of the city. The magnitude of her achievement was finally beginning to sink in for her family. This wasn't just a financial windfall, it was recognition on a national level, validation from industry leaders, the kind of success that would define her career for decades to come. I've been getting calls all week from venture capitalists, other tech companies, business schools that want me to speak to their students, Rebecca said. My entire life has changed in ways that go far beyond the money. Her father had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the conversation, but now he looked up from the phone with an expression of deep regret. Rebecca, I owe you an enormous apology. We all do. We've been blind to your accomplishments, dismissive of your potential, and apparently completely wrong about who you are as a person. The admission was more than Rebecca had ever expected to hear from her father, but it also felt insufficient given the years of casual dismissal and favoritism toward Marcus. Do you understand what it was like sitting at my own birthday dinner, listening to you tell Marcus that successful people take risks while implying that I was mediocre and complacent? Rebecca asked. Do you have any idea how that felt, knowing that I had taken bigger risks than anyone in this family? Marcus set the phone down and looked directly at his sister, perhaps seeing her clearly for the first time in years. I said those things to you. About complacency and mediocrity? Jesus Christ, Becca, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what you were working on. That's exactly the problem, Rebecca replied. You had no idea because you never asked. None of you ever asked what I was passionate about, what I was working toward, what my dreams were. You just assumed that because my job seemed stable and predictable, that's all I was.
The waiter approached their table cautiously, clearly aware that this was not a typical family celebration. "Is everything all right here? Can I get you anything?" "Actually," Rebecca said, looking around at her stunned family, "I think we need a few more minutes." After the waiter retreated, her mother reached across the table and took Rebecca's hand. "Sweetheart, I don't know how to express how sorry I am. Not just about forgetting your birthday, but about failing to see who you really are." The gesture was more than Carol had offered Rebecca in years, but the damage of decades couldn't be undone with a single apology. "I've spent my entire adult life trying to prove myself to this family," Rebecca said, "trying to earn the kind of recognition and celebration that Marcus got for simply meeting expectations. And now, when I finally achieved something truly extraordinary, you're sorry for not noticing sooner?" Her words hung in the air like an indictment of their family dynamic. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably beginning to realize that his lifetime of preferential treatment had come at his sister's expense. "What can we do?" her father asked. "How can we make this right?" Rebecca considered the question seriously. Part of her wanted to tell them that it was too late, that the years of dismissal and favoritism couldn't be undone with apologies and promises. But another part of her, the part that had always craved their approval and recognition, wanted to believe that this moment could be a turning point. "I don't know," she said honestly. "This isn't something that can be fixed with a single conversation or a belated celebration. You've spent 30 years treating me like the dependable, unambitious daughter while assuming Marcus was the one destined for greatness." Marcus looked genuinely stricken. "Becca, I never wanted that kind of favoritism. I didn't realize it was happening at your expense." "Didn't you?" Rebecca asked pointedly. "You've never wondered why our parents celebrated your minor achievements more enthusiastically than my major ones? You never noticed that family conversations always centered around your life and career?" The question forced Marcus to confront his own role in the family dynamic. He had been the beneficiary of their parents' favoritism for so long that he had stopped questioning whether it was fair or deserved. "I guess I thought that's just how families worked," he admitted, "parents paying more attention to the child who needs more support." "But I didn't need less support," Rebecca countered. "I needed different support. I needed recognition for what I was actually accomplishing, not dismissal because my path looked more conventional." Her phone buzzed with another call from a reporter, reminding her that the outside world was still very interested in her story. The acquisition had made her newsworthy in ways that extended far beyond Seattle's business community. "I should take this," she said, glancing at the caller ID. "It's from Fortune magazine." As she answered the call, Rebecca was acutely aware of her family watching her with expressions of awe and confusion. The confident, articulate woman speaking to a national business reporter was someone they had never seen before, despite living with her for 18 years and maintaining relationships with her for 30. The interview lasted 10 minutes, with Rebecca discussing her development process, the market need her software addressed, and her plans for future entrepreneurial ventures. When she hung up, her family was still staring at her as though she had just performed magic. "That was incredible," Marcus said. "You sounded like you've been doing press interviews your whole life." "I've been preparing for this moment for 3 years," Rebecca replied. "I knew that if the acquisition went through, I would need to be ready for media attention and public speaking opportunities." Her mother was shaking her head slowly. "I feel like I don't know my own daughter. How did we miss all of this? How did we not see what you were capable of?" The question would haunt Rebecca for years to come. How had her own family been so blind to her potential, so dismissive of her ambitions, so convinced that Marcus was the only one worth celebrating? "I don't know," she said honestly. "This isn't something that can be fixed with a single conversation or a belated celebration. You've spent 30 years treating me like the dependable, unambitious daughter while assuming Marcus was the one destined for greatness." Marcus looked genuinely stricken. "Becca, I never wanted that kind of favoritism. I didn't realize it was happening at your expense." "Didn't you?" Rebecca asked pointedly. You've never wondered why our parents celebrated your minor achievements more enthusiastically than my major ones? You never noticed that family conversations always centered around your life and career? The question forced Marcus to confront his own role in the family dynamic. He had been the beneficiary of their parents' favoritism for so long that he had stopped questioning whether it was fair or deserved. I guess I thought that's just how families worked, he admitted. Parents pay more attention to the child who needs more support. But I didn't need less support, Rebecca countered. I needed different support. I needed recognition for what I was actually accomplishing, not dismissal because my path looked more conventional. Her phone buzzed with another call from a reporter, reminding her that the outside world was still very interested in her story. The acquisition had made her newsworthy in ways that extended far beyond Seattle's business community. I should take this, she said, glancing at the caller ID. It's from Fortune magazine. As she answered the call, Rebecca was acutely aware of her family watching her with expressions of awe and confusion. The confident, articulate woman speaking to a national business reporter was someone they had never seen before, despite living with her for 18 years and maintaining relationships with her for 30. The interview lasted 10 minutes, with Rebecca discussing her development process, the market need her software addressed, and her plans for future entrepreneurial ventures. When she hung up, her family was still staring at her as though she had just performed magic. "That was incredible," Marcus said. "You sounded like you've been doing press interviews your whole life." "I've been preparing for this moment for 3 years," Rebecca replied. "I knew that if the acquisition went through, I would need to be ready for media attention and public speaking opportunities." Her mother was shaking her head slowly. "I feel like I don't know my own daughter. How did we miss all of this? How did we not see what you were capable of?" The question would haunt Rebecca for years to come. How had her own family been so blind to her potential, so dismissive of her ambitions, so convinced that Marcus was the only one worth celebrating? "I don't know," she said honestly. "This isn't something that can be fixed with a single conversation or a belated celebration. You've spent 30 years treating me like the dependable, unambitious daughter while assuming Marcus was the one destined for greatness."
But sitting in that restaurant, watching her family grapple with the reality of who she had become while they weren't paying attention, Rebecca finally felt something she had been seeking her entire life: their complete and undivided attention. The invisible daughter had finally forced them to see her, not through gradual recognition or accumulated small achievements, but through one explosive revelation that shattered every assumption they had ever made about her capabilities. The lunch they had planned as another celebration of Marcus's success had become something entirely different: a reckoning with 30 years of family dynamics, a forced acknowledgement of their failures as parents and siblings, and the beginning of what would either be a complete transformation of their relationships or the end of any pretense that they truly knew each other at all. The silence at their table stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Rebecca watched her family process the magnitude of what she had revealed, seeing decades of assumptions crumble in real time. Her father was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. $58 million, he repeated, as though saying the number might make it feel more real. "Rebecca, that's more than I've made in my entire career. That's generational wealth." The comment stung, not because it was intended to hurt, but because it revealed how little he had understood about what she was building. For Robert, success was measured in accumulated earnings over time. He couldn't comprehend that his daughter had created something so valuable that a major corporation was willing to pay a fortune for it overnight. "It's not just about the money, Dad," Rebecca said, though she knew the financial aspect would be the easiest for them to grasp. "It's about creating something that solves real problems for thousands of companies. It's about innovation and entrepreneurship and taking risks that actually matter." Marcus was scrolling through additional articles on his phone, his expression growing more stunned with each headline he read. "Becca, you're being called the next Steve Jobs of organizational software. This article says your platform could revolutionize how Fortune 500 companies handle restructuring." The comparison to Steve Jobs was hyperbolic, but Rebecca appreciated that Marcus was beginning to understand the scope of her achievement. This wasn't just a lucky business deal. It was recognition of her ability to identify market needs and create solutions that didn't exist before. "I've been invited to speak at the TED conference next year," Rebecca added, watching their faces register this additional layer of her newfound prominence. "Harvard Business School wants to do a case study on my development process. 3 different venture capital firms have approached me about funding my next project." Carol was dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, mascara creating dark streaks on the white fabric. "I don't understand how this happened without us knowing. How did you learn to code? When did you develop business expertise? How did you even know where to start with something like this?" The questions revealed the depth of their ignorance about her capabilities and interests. Rebecca realized that her family had been so comfortable with their assumptions about her that they had never bothered to explore who she actually was beneath the surface. "I started taking programming courses online about 4 years ago," Rebecca explained. "At first, it was just curiosity, but then I began to see applications for the organizational challenges I was dealing with in my consulting work. I taught myself Python, then Java, then specialized languages for database management and user interface design." She paused, watching their faces register this information. "I spent every evening and weekend for 3 years, learning, building, testing, refining. I worked with beta testers at 6 different companies to perfect the functionality. I studied patent law to protect my intellectual property. I learned venture capital processes, acquisition terminology, and negotiation strategies." The list of skills she had developed sounded impressive even to her own ears. Only now, speaking it aloud to her family, did Rebecca fully appreciate the magnitude of what she had accomplished through sheer determination and self-directed learning. "But why didn't you tell us?" her mother asked, the hurt evident in her voice. "We could have helped, provided support, celebrated your milestones along the way." Rebecca looked at each of them in turn, seeing genuine confusion in their faces. They truly couldn't understand why she had kept such a significant project secret from them. "When would you have celebrated my milestones?" she asked gently. "When I completed my first successful code module? When I filed my first patent? When the beta testing showed 40% efficiency improvements? Every time I might have shared good news with you, Marcus had something more immediate and tangible to celebrate." The accusation hung in the air, impossible to deny because it was demonstrably true. Rebecca's phone contained evidence of dozens of text messages over the past 3 years where she had considered sharing updates about her project, only to be preempted by family conversations about Marcus's latest career developments. "That's not fair," Marcus protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "You could have insisted on sharing your news. You could have demanded equal time and attention." "Could I?" Rebecca challenged. "When has this family ever operated that way? When have I ever been able to demand equal time without being labeled as jealous or attention-seeking?" The question forced Marcus to confront patterns he had always taken for granted. He had never needed to compete for their parents' attention because it had always been freely given. Rebecca, meanwhile, had learned early that drawing attention to her own achievements was likely to be met with polite acknowledgement followed by rapid redirection to more interesting topics. "I think," Robert said slowly, "we need to acknowledge that we've failed you as parents, not just by forgetting your birthday, but by creating an environment where you felt you couldn't share the most important project of your life with us." The admission was more direct than Rebecca had expected from her father, who typically avoided discussions of emotional dynamics in favor of practical problem solving. "It's not entirely your fault," Rebecca replied, surprising herself with the generosity of the statement. "I chose to keep it secret partly because I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed without depending on family connections or expectations. But I also kept it secret because I was tired of having my achievements overshadowed or dismissed." A young woman at a nearby table was discreetly taking photos with her phone, apparently recognizing Rebecca from the news coverage. The acquisition had made her locally famous in ways that felt surreal after 30 years of invisibility within her own family. "Miss Chen?" A man approached their table hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I read about your software platform in the Times this morning. I run a mid-sized logistics company, and we're exactly the kind of business that could benefit from your solution. Could I give you my card?" The interruption was perfectly timed, providing concrete evidence of Rebecca's newfound prominence while her family watched in amazement.
She accepted the business card graciously and promised to have someone from Tech Giant's implementation team contact him within the week. After the man returned to his table, Marcus stared at his sister with something approaching awe. That was surreal. People recognize you on the street now. It's been happening all week, Rebecca replied. The local business community is small enough that major acquisitions get attention quickly. I've been invited to 3 networking events, 2 board positions, and a charity gala just since Wednesday. The transformation was so complete that her family seemed to be struggling to reconcile this confident, sought-after entrepreneur with the quiet daughter they had always taken for granted. What happens now? Carol asked. Do you stay at Tech Giant? Do you start another company?
Do you retire at 30 with all this money? The questions revealed how little they understood about entrepreneurial careers. For Rebecca, the acquisition wasn't an ending but a beginning, the foundation for whatever came next. I'm staying with Tech Giant for 2 years to help integrate the platform and develop the next generation of features, Rebecca explained. After that, I'm not sure. I might start another company, or join a venture capital firm, or teach at a business school. The financial security gives me options I never had before. She paused, looking around at their stunned faces. What I won't do is go back to being invisible. I won't accept being treated as the dependable, unambitious daughter while Marcus gets celebrated for meeting basic expectations. The comment was delivered without malice, but it landed like a challenge. The family dynamics that had shaped their relationships for decades would need to fundamentally change if they wanted to maintain meaningful connections going forward. I understand, Robert said quietly, and I think we all need to examine how we've contributed to those dynamics. Marcus nodded reluctantly. I've been thinking about all the times I dominated family conversations, all the celebrations that centered around my achievements while yours went unrecognized. I never realized how unfair that was. It wasn't entirely intentional, Rebecca acknowledged, but impact matters more than intention. The result was that I learned to minimize my own successes to avoid creating tension. Their waiter returned, clearly unsure how to navigate the emotional intensity at the table. Can I bring you anything else? Dessert? Coffee? Actually, Rebecca said, making a decision that surprised even her, I'd like to order a bottle of your best champagne. It's time to properly celebrate something. The request seemed to jolt her family back to the present moment. After 30 years of watching other people's achievements get celebrated, Rebecca was finally claiming her right to acknowledgement and recognition. What are we celebrating? Carol asked tentatively. My 30th birthday, Rebecca replied simply, and the biggest business deal in our family's history, and the fact that we're finally having an honest conversation about who we actually are. When the champagne arrived, Rebecca took control of the toast, standing at the head of their table with confidence that would have been impossible just a week earlier. To taking risks, she said, echoing Marcus's words from her forgotten birthday dinner. To creating value where none existed before. To proving that success comes in many forms, and that the most impressive achievements are often the ones that happen when nobody's paying attention. The toast was a gentle rebuke wrapped in celebration, acknowledging her triumph while highlighting their failure to recognize it sooner. But as they clinked glasses, Rebecca saw something in her family's faces that she had rarely seen before, genuine respect for her accomplishments. I have something to confess, Marcus said, after they had all sipped their champagne. I've always been intimidated by how smart you are, Becca. Even when we were kids, you understood things that took me much longer to figure out. I think part of the reason I dominated family conversations was because I was trying to prove I deserved as much attention as you did. The admission was startling in its honesty and vulnerability. Rebecca had never suspected that Marcus felt threatened by her intelligence, largely because their parents had always celebrated his achievements more enthusiastically. I never knew you felt that way, she replied. From my perspective, you were the golden child who could do no wrong, while I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Maybe we were both right, Marcus suggested. Maybe Mom and Dad's favoritism toward me was their way of compensating for feeling like I needed more support to keep up with you academically. Rebecca considered this interpretation, which reframed their family dynamics in a way she had never contemplated.
Perhaps her parents' favoritism hadn't been based on loving Marcus more, but on believing he needed more encouragement to succeed. That might explain the favoritism, she said carefully, but it doesn't justify dismissing my achievements or forgetting my birthday. No, it doesn't, Carol agreed, her voice thick with regret. And I want you to know that we're going to do better going forward. We're going to pay attention, celebrate your successes, and make sure you never feel invisible again. The promise was heartfelt, but Rebecca had learned to be cautious about commitments made in moments of high emotion. Real change would require sustained effort over time, not just good intentions expressed during a dramatic confrontation. I hope so, she replied honestly, but I need you to understand that this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. 30 years of feeling overlooked doesn't disappear with one conversation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer at Tech Giant, asking if she could participate in a conference call with potential enterprise clients on Monday morning. The request was a reminder that Rebecca's new life was moving forward regardless of family dynamics. I should probably head home, she said, gathering her purse. I have multiple interviews scheduled for this afternoon and a conference call with Tech Giant CEO tonight about integration timelines. The casual mention of speaking with a Fortune 500 CEO seemed to further underscore the gap between Rebecca's new reality and her family's perception of her capabilities. Will we see you again soon? Carol asked, the question carrying undertones of desperation. Maybe dinner next weekend? Maybe, Rebecca replied, though she wasn't sure she was ready for another family gathering so soon. Let me get through the next few weeks of media attention and business meetings first. As she prepared to leave, Marcus stood and embraced her, something he hadn't done in years. I'm proud of you, Becca. I'm sorry it took something this dramatic for me to say it, but I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. The words meant more to Rebecca than she had expected. Despite everything, Marcus's opinion still mattered to her, and his acknowledgement of her success felt like validation she had been seeking for decades. Thank you, she replied simply. Her parents also embraced her before she left, Carol clinging to her daughter as though trying to make up for years of emotional distance through physical contact. I love you, sweetheart, Carol whispered. I'm sorry we didn't see you clearly before. The drive home gave Rebecca time to process the afternoon's events. The confrontation had unfolded exactly as she had hoped, forcing her family to reckon with their assumptions while demonstrating the magnitude of her achievement. But she also felt emotionally drained, as though she had been holding her breath for 30 years and had finally been allowed to exhale. Her phone rang as she pulled into her apartment building's parking garage. It was Sarah, calling from Portland. How did it go with your family? Sarah asked immediately. Exactly as dramatic as you would expect, Rebecca replied. Complete shock, lots of tears, admissions of guilt, promises to do better. Do you believe them?
Rebecca considered the question as she rode the elevator to her apartment. I want to believe them, but I'm not sure people can change ingrained patterns that easily. What matters is that you finally got their attention, Sarah pointed out. After 30 years of being overlooked, you forced them to see you. That's got to feel good. It does, Rebecca admitted. But it also feels strange to realize that it took a $58 million acquisition to get my own family to take me seriously. Once inside her apartment, Rebecca poured herself a glass of wine and sat by her window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city looked the same as it had a week ago, but her relationship to it had fundamentally changed. She was no longer just another resident working a predictable job. She was now one of its most notable success stories. Her laptop contained dozens of unread emails from reporters, business partners, former colleagues, and complete strangers who wanted to connect with the woman behind the headline. The attention was overwhelming, but also validating after years of feeling ignored. As the evening progressed, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the conversation with her family. Their shock and regret had been genuine, but she wondered if they truly understood the depth of their failure to see her clearly. They were focused on the dramatic revelation, the money, the sudden fame, but they seemed to miss the more fundamental issue of how they had created an environment where she felt compelled to hide her most important work. The acquisition was the culmination of everything Rebecca had been working toward, but it was also a beginning.
The financial security would allow her to take risks she could never have afforded before. The professional recognition would open doors that had previously been closed. The media attention would give her a platform to influence conversations about entrepreneurship and innovation. But perhaps most importantly, the revelation had fundamentally altered her relationship with her family. They could never again dismiss her as the dependable, unambitious daughter. They would be forced to see her as someone capable of extraordinary achievement, someone worthy of attention and celebration. 3 weeks later, Rebecca was featured on the cover of Businessweek, photographed in her new office at tech giant's Seattle headquarters. The article described her as one of the most promising entrepreneurs of her generation, someone who had identified a crucial market need and created an elegant solution that major corporations were eager to adopt. The same day the magazine hit newsstands, Rebecca received a text from her mother. "Saw your cover story. We couldn't be prouder. Dad bought 50 copies to share with everyone he knows." The message was touching in its enthusiasm, but it also highlighted how much their relationship had changed. Her parents were now eager to claim credit for her success, to bask in reflected glory they hadn't contributed to. Rebecca found herself in the strange position of having achieved everything she had ever wanted, while questioning whether the victory felt as satisfying as she had expected. The financial security was liberating, the professional recognition was validating, and the family acknowledgement was long overdue. But she also realized that her happiness couldn't depend entirely on external validation, even from the people whose approval she had sought for so long. A month after the acquisition announcement, Marcus called to invite her to lunch, just the two of them. It was the first time he had ever initiated a one-on-one conversation with her as adults. They met at a quiet cafe near her office, far from the upscale restaurants where their family typically gathered. Marcus looked nervous in a way Rebecca had never seen before, as though he was unsure how to navigate their relationship now that the power dynamics had shifted. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation at Metropolitan Grill," he began, "about the patterns in our family, about how my success was always celebrated while yours was ignored." Rebecca waited for him to continue, curious about what he wanted to say. "I think I need to acknowledge that I benefited from that favoritism without questioning whether it was fair," Marcus continued. "I got comfortable being the center of attention and stopped considering how that affected you." The admission was more self-aware than Rebecca had expected from her brother. "I appreciate you saying that," she replied. "I also want you to know that I've started paying more attention to family dynamics," Marcus added. "At dinner last week, Mom and Dad spent the entire time talking about your upcoming TED Talk and the Harvard case study. It felt weird to not be the focus of the conversation, but also made me realize how weird it must have felt for you all those years." Rebecca smiled at the image of Marcus experiencing what she had felt at countless family gatherings. "It's an adjustment, isn't it?" "It is," Marcus agreed, "but it's also overdue. You deserve to be celebrated for what you've accomplished." The conversation continued for over an hour, with both siblings examining their relationship with new honesty and perspective. They didn't solve 30 years of complicated dynamics in a single lunch, but they established a foundation for building something healthier going forward. 6 months after the acquisition, Rebecca was invited to speak at her university's graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of new graduates and their families, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "Success," she told the audience, "isn't always visible when it's happening. Some of the most important work we do occurs when nobody's watching, when we're learning new skills, taking risks, and building something that doesn't exist yet." In the audience, she could see her parents and Marcus sitting in the front row, beaming with pride as she delivered her keynote address. Their transformation wasn't complete, but it was genuine. They had learned to see her clearly, to celebrate her achievements, to recognize that success comes in many forms. "Don't wait for permission to pursue your dreams," Rebecca continued, speaking to the graduates but thinking about her own journey. "Don't wait for others to recognize your potential. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is believing in yourself when nobody else does." After her speech, dozens of students approached her with questions about entrepreneurship, innovation, and taking risks. Their enthusiasm reminded Rebecca of her own younger self, hungry for knowledge and opportunity, but unsure how to proceed. The hardest part, she told one particularly eager computer science major, isn't learning the technical skills or finding the funding. It's maintaining confidence in your vision when everyone around you thinks you're pursuing something impossible. That evening, her family hosted a celebration dinner in honor of her speaking engagement. But this time, the event was genuinely about Rebecca, planned around her schedule and preferences, focused entirely on her achievement. To Rebecca, her father said, raising his glass in a toast, who taught us that the most impressive success stories are often the ones that happen when we're not paying attention. The toast was an acknowledgement of their failure to see her clearly, but also a celebration of what she had accomplished despite their oversight. As they clinked glasses, Rebecca felt something she had been seeking her entire life, the complete attention and respect of her family. But she also realized that their approval, while meaningful, was no longer essential to her sense of self-worth. The woman who had built a revolutionary software platform and negotiated a $58 million acquisition didn't need external validation to know her own view. The acquisition had changed her life in ways that extended far beyond financial security. It had forced her family to see her clearly, opened doors to opportunities she had never imagined, and most importantly, proved to herself that she was capable of extraordinary achievement. Standing in her childhood home, surrounded by the people who had shaped her, for better and worse, Rebecca realized that her journey was far from over. The acquisition was just the beginning, the foundation for whatever came next. But for the first time in her life, she was moving forward with the complete support and recognition of her family, no longer invisible, but finally seen for exactly who she had always been. The forgotten birthday had become the catalyst for everything that followed. The family dinner that should have celebrated her 30th year instead became the moment when she decided to stop accepting their indifference and demand the recognition she had always deserved. Sometimes the most painful experiences become the foundation for the most significant transformations. As Rebecca looked around at her family, she knew that none of them would ever forget another birthday, overlook another achievement, or fail to see the remarkable woman who had been hiding in plain sight for 30 years. The invisible daughter had finally stepped into the light, and there was no going back to the shadows. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.